Hello everyone, my name is Kenton Kivestu. I'm an ex-Googler, an ex-BCG consultant, and the founder of RocketBlocks, an online platform that helps candidates prepare for interviews. In today's RocketBlocks mini lesson, we're going to talk about a fun topic, which is thinking about two different career paths and comparing them to each other. Now, the ones we're going to focus on are ones that are sort of personal and near and dear to me because I've spent time in both of these different career paths and wrestled with the question myself, which is management consulting versus product management. And what we're going to do for this video is we're going to look at those two career paths and compare them on a bunch of key dimensions that you'll care about if you're thinking about one of these two paths. Things like, what's the collaboration like with teammates? What's the nature of the work like? What does the career ladder look like? What are the opportunities in both these paths? And of course, what does the compensation look like and how does that change over time? So let's go ahead and jump in. Okay, the first key dimension I want to talk about is the nature of the work. And this is a critical one because this is what you're going to spend your time doing, whether you're a consultant or a product manager. And the key canonical distinction here is that consultants tend to focus on strategic work and product managers tend to have a more operational job. Now, this doesn't mean that a consultant will never do anything operational or vice versa, that a PM doesn't get to do anything strategic. It just means that the bulk of their work is going to fall into one of these two categories. Now, let's break that down and think about what that looks like a little bit more. If you're a consultant, a sort of prototypical case might look like, hey, HP has hired our firm and they're interested in doing a study with us to understand whether they're well priced in the market for their set of mid-range printers relative to their competitors. And your manager might assign you the particular work stream of doing a study of how a particular set of printers lines up in the market against competitive features, against competitive printers out there, thinking about the particular features and the value that's offered to customers and what the actual price points that they sell are, and then to be able to come back at the end of that and make a recommendation and say, yeah, we're overpriced relative to the value we're offering, or underpriced, and I think we could raise prices a little bit. But it's essentially sort of an analytical work, thinking about their position and making a recommendation based off their findings. They're not actually building anything or launching anything. They're not changing the prices themselves. They're just studying the situation and making a recommendation. On the flip side, if you're a product manager, the nature of your work is going to be very, very operational, especially at the more junior levels. Now imagine you are, say, a product manager at Instacart and the company has determined that they're going to enter the Brazilian market for the first time. And your specific role that your manager may ask you, hey, we're entering the Brazilian market. We've never worked with Brazilian grocery stores. We know their inventory is going to be different. We know how they keep track of inventory is a little bit different. So we need you to build and launch the ingestion engine that's going to help us take inventory lists from Brazilian grocery stores and import them into our system so that we can show them nicely and beautifully on our mobile app to our new Brazilian consumers. So very different type of work. It's about, understanding a very specific niche problem in this case and figuring out what's the right way to attack that and actually building a solution to it rather than focusing and just sort of analyzing a high-level business problem. Now, both have their pros and cons and different people gravitate toward different aspects of them. But that is the first key difference. Okay, the second key dimension I want to talk about is teamwork. Now, don't get me wrong, both consulting and product management are team sports, so they have that in common. But there is a key distinction, and that is the type of output that each of your teammates is going to be producing in the different roles. So let's talk about consulting first. If we think about that case that we started with, the HP printing case, maybe there's a partner that sold that case, maybe there's an engagement manager that's sort of running point on the case, and then a consultant like yourself and a handful of associates working on it. Each of those team members ultimately are going to be working together to produce a recommendation to the client at the end of the case. And you as a consultant, maybe you're focused on the competitive pricing landscape. Your teammate, one of them might be focused on user research. At the end of the day, you're ultimately both going to be doing analytical things. You're going to package up your work into slides that ultimately will go into a recommendation that you'll make to the client. And your engagement manager is going to be overseeing that work and helping you with that work. You're all going to be collaborating and presenting it to each other as you're going along and testing different insights and stress testing things. And ultimately, the partner will be involved in this as well. So you're all working together on similar type of work with the goal of a single sort of output, which is a slide deck and a recommendation. So small team environment, and everyone is sort of producing and doing the same type of work. In product management, the big distinction is that while it may also be a small team, sometimes the teams can be a little bigger, the big distinction is that every member on the team is likely going to be producing very different type of output. So the role of the engineers on the team, they're going to be writing code. The designers are going to be making mocks to make your apps, pretty and user-friendly. The salespeople that you're collaborating with are hopefully, on the phone, closing sales deals or on Zoom calls. Marketers might be writing marketing copy, working to produce product demos and video demos. Operational people might be getting things sort of lined up if you work in a more operationally intensive tech company. But each of the folks that a product manager is engaging with on a daily basis is going to be producing very different output from themselves. So while the nature is similar, they're both team sports. The environment amongst individuals in the team is going to be a little bit different because the fundamental underlying output that each person on the team is producing is a lot more varied in the product management world than it is in the consulting world. Okay, third key dimension I want to think about is what does the career ladder look like? Now, there's some pretty big differences here. On the consulting side, the career ladder is super clear cut. It is explained up front, and you can even read about it long before you go into the career and know sort of exactly what you're getting yourself into. Generally, when you join a Bain or BCG, McKinsey, any firm like that, they're going to tell you, here's what the ladder looks like. You're going to join at this level. If you're still here in 2 years, you'll move up to this level. If you succeed at that level after 2 years, we'll move you to this level. And if you succeed at that, we'll move you to partner after another 2 years. So essentially, like coming in out of an MBA, you can know, hey, if I'm still at this firm in 8 years, I'm basically going to be a partner and I'm making X amount of money. Now, that's an incredibly clear cut, organized, and to some extent, rigid system. You're either moving up that ladder or, depending on your performance, you may be asked to move out, which is referred to as sort of the up and out policy in consulting. The good news is that it's structured, you know what to expect. The bad news is that it's fairly rigid, and it does mean if you don't move up, that you eventually move out of the firm. Now, if you compare that to product management, the only real similarity is that at big tech firms, there is a clear hierarchy. There are associate product managers at the bottom of the totem pole, then product managers, then senior product managers, directors of product, VPs of product. However, the progression through that career ladder is hugely varied. This happens for a few reasons at tech firms. One of the big ones is that tech companies tend to prefer very flat corporate hierarchies. So this means that there ends up being relatively few jobs at the top of the ladder. Directors and VPs are managing massive teams, while at the bottom of the ladder, you have a bunch of individual contributors that are basically focused on their specific role and scope. So it makes less room at the top for people to sort of move up gradually, like you have happening in the consulting world. And then the other thing is you can't expect to move up on any sort of consistent cadence. There's no sort of promise when you join Google as, say, a PM, that if you do well in 2 years, you'll automatically be a senior PM, sort of the way that if you're at BCG and you join as a consultant and perform well in 2 years, you'll be moved into the project leader title with the rest of your cohort. So it ends up creating a lot of distribution over time, and you have situations where two people at relatively with the same experience might join a tech company, and after 5 years, one of them is a director and one of them is still a PM. And the work that they're doing at those different levels is going to look very different. Whereas if you take two people joining a consulting firm right out of MBA and they're both still there in 5 years, almost certainly the type of work they're doing on a daily basis and the level they're at is going to be nearly identical. Okay, the fourth dimension we're going to look at is compensation. And I know this is the one everyone's been waiting for. The key takeaway here, though, which may be a little bit surprising for folks, is actually they're more similar than different. And how we're going to illustrate this is we're going to talk about a freshly minted MBA and look at him or her joining McKinsey as an associate right out of school or Google as a product manager one. And then we'll look at if that same person advanced from associate all the way to partner at McKinsey and at Google from product manager one all the way to director of product. Okay, so let's jump into the actual example itself. If you were a new associate joining McKinsey right out of MBA, you'd be paid all in about $200K these days. It's about $165,000 in base salary and $35,000 in performance bonus. And these are USD numbers that I'm talking about here. So about $200K all in. On the product management side at Google as a PM1, it's going to look pretty similar. The base salary tends to be about 140 to 150, and then you get about 50 to 60K. There's more variance here in bonus and equity. So you're going to end up maybe a little bit above 200, maybe 210, but you're basically going to be at 210 and 200 at the starting level. So really, in the grand scheme of things, these are essentially the same. Now, if we fast forward on the McKinsey side and go look at a partner, there is some messiness in how partner compensation is calculated. It depends on if you're a junior partner or a senior partner, and also, most importantly, how much business you bring in. But you can basically expect something of a base salary around $350,000 to about maybe $500,000, and then a compensation part from commissions and sales coming in that's probably another $300,000 to about $500,000. So maybe on the low end you're talking about $600,000, and on the higher end of a more junior partner you're talking about $1 million a year. On the flip side, if you look at a Google director of product, they're going to be making about $300,000 in base salary and about $700,000 in equity, mostly equity, and a little bit of performance bonus there. So again, about $1 million. So these look pretty similar in the grand scheme of things. Now, the big caveat is that the absolute number one driver of how much you're getting paid is the actual title and level you're at. And as we talked about in the prior section, on the consulting side, it tends to be pretty clear cut of how you're going to move from one level to the next. Now, it's not guaranteed that you move from one level to the next, but the path and the tenure at each level and moving up and getting those salary bumps is very clear. On the product management side, as we talked about, it's a lot less clear. And so getting to that director title and getting the compensation that comes with that tends to be a little bit more wiggly and up in the air. Now, the last thing that needs to be mentioned on the compensation front is that there is also, again, this is a theme here in these discussions, but more variance on the product management side. There are certain product managers that are working in really hot areas, or as they advance in their career have very specific skill sets that get developed, maybe particular types of technologies or products that they've launched that are highly in demand. And companies, especially the big tech companies like Google, Facebook, Amazon, Microsoft, will sometimes pay up dramatically in the equity portion of their offers. And that can make, especially once you start talking in the senior levels, make those gaps open up between product management and the consulting side. Okay, now that we've covered the 4 key dimensions, let's talk about a few other grab bag dimensions that I think are worth considering. And the first of those is travel. If you're really interested in having a job that as part of it you move around the world, see new places, etc., I think that's something worth considering. And consulting definitely probably has the upper hand there. The big obvious caveat here is COVID. And COVID-19 has changed that completely at the moment. Both product managers and consultants are sitting at home on Zoom calls, and it looks the same. The big question is what will happen in the new normal whenever we do reach that. And I think most likely what we'll see is that in some version of new normal, consultants will travel a lot less than they do today, but they will still probably revert back to traveling more than your average product manager. So if that's something that's attractive to you, that's worth keeping in mind. Then the other dimension that I think is worth interesting and thinking about is just your particular passion and interest in technology. If you find yourself drawn to the idea of building software, you get excited about new technologies, etc., that is the type of thing that you are just going to get experience, hands-on experience as a product manager in spades, going that career path. And so if that's something that you find particularly compelling, I think product management might have an edge for you in that regard. The flip side is that consulting is really good at developing the core sort of fundamental business skill set. And I think if you talk to any consultants, we have some videos, I'll put the links down below, talk about the number one skill set they generate and build in these jobs. It's the ability to take any type of problem and structure it into a clear-cut framework that's easy to sort of understand, break down, and solve in a logical fashion. And so developing that sort of core skill set, it may not be bleeding edge technology, but you can take that skill set once you've developed it and apply it anywhere. So those are the other two considerations that I'll mention. Okay, a few last words of advice that I want to leave you with. If you're deciding between these two career paths, I think the focus area for you in the comparison should really be in the first two dimensions that we spoke about, the nature of the work and whether you gravitate toward operational, getting your hands dirty type work, or you like thinking about the high level strategic issues and all the different scenarios that could play out and modeling and thinking through each of those. The second thing is that nature of teamwork and collaboration. Those two things together are going to be the biggest drivers of your day-to-day happiness and satisfaction on the job. And I don't think it's worth sacrificing that for a couple bucks more on the compensation front, especially since they're going to weigh out so equally. So that's the first thing. The second thing is also know that these jobs are not necessarily mutually exclusive. There are plenty of consultants that go on to become product managers, and while it's a little more rare to go the reverse direction, it does happen as well. So you could potentially have your cake and eat it too. Thank you so much for watching. We have a ton of content coming out on both a consulting and product management career path, so if you haven't subscribed yet already, please do so now. There is a big red button below, and that means you'll get all of our content as soon as it comes out. Thanks for watching, and have a great day.